In my past life, my sister and I were promised in marriage by our father to the sons of his benefactors. I married into the Fei family. My husband was Fei Haoluan, a man skilled in martial arts. My sister married into the Jiang family. Her husband was Jiang Wentuan, a man known for his literary talents. But after marriage, Fei Haoluan revealed his cruelty and arrogance. He indulged his concubine, a barbarian woman, who once flayed my dog alive right before my eyes. Crushed by humiliation, I fell ill. And when it came time to give birth, the labor was difficult. I bled out and died. As for my sister, once bright and full of life, she became trapped in a marriage with Jiang Wentuan, a rigid man bound by propriety. He despised her lively, free-spirited nature. Soon after their wedding, he spent every day reciting poetry and drinking with his cousin. My sister was confined to her chambers like a bird in a gilded cage. In the end, she died of grief. When I opened my eyes again, my sister and I had returned to the very day the Fei and Jiang families came to propose. This time, she looked at me with pleading eyes. "Sister," she said, "this life, let me marry into the Fei family and you into the Jiang family, okay?" I slapped her. "Silly girl. Marry them again. Was the last life not tragic enough? Marriage, determined by our parents." Such a simple phrase, yet it ruined both our lives. Before I gave birth, I learned from Fei Haoluan's concubine that my sister, Song Tingyi, had died. She was 3 years younger than me, yet she passed before I did. Pain tore through my belly, threatening to split me in two. My body was already frail, and now crushed by grief, I no longer cared to live. The physician only shook his head and sighed. "If the madam won't push, I fear she won't survive this." I no longer hoped for the child to live. Better for it to die with me than suffer the torment of this world. As my consciousness faded, I saw a familiar scene in my haze. Our father promising the two of us to the Fei and Jiang families. Years ago, when he was in peril in Guangzhou, those families took him in. Even after marrying our mother and becoming a wealthy merchant, he never forgot that kindness. So, when the sons of those families came to propose with tokens in hand, he agreed without hesitation, never asking about their characters, never considering our futures, all for a debt of gratitude. But for that single word, gratitude, my sister and I wasted 5 precious years of youth, only to die in vain. My final thoughts were filled with hatred. I hated Fei Haoluan. I hated Jiang Wentuan. I hated my father. I hated everyone who had led us down that path. If I could live again, I would never let that so-called debt ruin our lives. And then, I opened my eyes again. 5 years before, the day the Fei and Jiang families came to propose. "Sister, sister," I stared in disbelief. My little sister stood before me, waving her delicate, pale hands. Hands I hadn't seen in so long. After marrying Jiang Wentuan, she was constantly scolded for not behaving properly. Every mistake earned her punishment, scrubbing the entire household's laundry. In just 5 years, her once soft hands had become calloused and deformed. "Sister, you were reborn too." I thought it through. Today is the day Fei Haoluan and Jiang Wentuan propose. This time, if you marry into the Jiang family and I into the Fei family, they won't mistreat us again. I narrowed my eyes and knocked her on the head. "Marry them again. Haven't we suffered enough?" She blinked, stunned. Tears welled up, then spilled down her cheeks. She lunged forward and hugged me tightly, sobbing into my neck. "Sister, what do we do now?" Her voice was filled with despair. In our last life, whenever we were wronged, we would return to the Song household seeking help. Father was indifferent. Mother only wept and told us to endure. No one ever protected us. This life, we can only save ourselves. I lifted my sobbing sister, looked her in the eyes, and said firmly, "Tingyi, for now don't think too much. Just do as I say. Do you remember the little shrine on the back hill outside the city? Go to Mother. Say you heard the shrine is very effective in granting sons, and ask her to take you there. Be sure to tell her the road is long, and we must bring many servants and guards. Whatever it takes, convince her to stay one night on the mountain." Mother's greatest regret was not bearing a son. That desire has lingered in her heart for years. My sister looked confused but nodded when I gripped her arm tightly and said coldly, "Do you understand?" Startled by the pain, her eyes cleared, and she nodded fiercely. "Yes, sister. I understand. In our past life, the Fei and Jiang families arrived with their matchmaking letters at Hour of the Goat. It was now hour of the dragon. I had 2 hours to prepare. 2 hours, more than enough. I had been trained in bookkeeping from a young age, and our grandfather had left behind many businesses, all under my care. At present, I controlled over a dozen shops and had many loyal followers. Among them, one was a shadow guard. His name was Zhang Hao, a frontier tribesman I once saved. No one else knew his true identity. Men like him were double-edged blades, deadly weapons in the right hands, but dangerous if misused. In my past life, I never truly put him to use. This time, I went to him personally. Back then, after marrying into the Fei household, all the businesses under my name were taken by Fei and Apos, S mother, under the excuse that I should focus on bearing heirs. Sensing something amiss, I discreetly dismissed all my loyal stewards. Zhang Hao was among them, but he refused to leave. Unfortunately, Fei Haoluan detested him. In the end, he forced Zhang Hao away from me. Now, as I stood before him again, the man lowered his head respectfully. He was over 6 feet tall, rugged and powerful, built like a boulder. A single man like him could probably take on 10 of Song Manor's guards alone. Time was short, so I spoke plainly. I plan to do something earth-shaking. Zhang Hao, if you swear to follow me to the death, I swear you'll share in my wealth and glory. Zhang Hao froze for a moment, then bowed even lower. Miss saved my life once. This life belongs to you. If you wish me to walk into fire or boiling water, I will not refuse. Gratitude, such a fragile thing. True loyalty is rare in this world. Most people do things with purpose. And I was a merchant. Merchants do not trade in sentiment. I said nothing. I only stared coldly at him. The silence grew heavy, like lead in the air. After half a stick of incense, Zhang Hao suddenly dropped to his knees. I want to ask you to help me find my sister. He began recounting. After 3 years of war on the frontier, he returned to find his mother dead and his sister missing. Her last words to the neighbors were that she planned to travel to the royal capital. Since then, he had searched tirelessly for her, but the more he found, the more suspicious things became. He discovered that his mother hadn't and Apos, T died of natural causes, and that his sister hadn't left willingly. Those neighbors had lied. By the time he finished, his voice was hoarse. I rose slowly, unsheathing the short dagger at my side. I don't know your sister, and I have no leads. But I swear this, if you do not betray me, I, Song Tingyuan, will dedicate my life to finding her. Until the day I die. Blood dripped from my palm. A blood oath, the most sacred vow in the royal kingdom. It is said the demon god will take the soul of any who breaks such an oath, condemning them forever. Zhang Hao stared at me in shock. Then, he dropped flat to the ground, bowing deeply. For you, I will wield my blade and brave any hell, without hesitation. To have others risk their lives for you, you must first give your heart to them. Rebirth is already a miracle. I will not let any misstep ruin this second chance. More than half of the manor and Apos, S guards had been sent away. I returned to the Song estate with Zhang Hao and a group of loyal men. Outside Consort Feng's courtyard, I ran into father. The moment he saw me, his expression darkened. The Fei and Zhang families will arrive any moment now, and you're still dressed like this. That had always been his tone with me. I smiled faintly and bowed with deliberate humility. Father, I have something important to discuss with you. It's regarding salt. At the word salt, his eyes narrowed. He glanced down, then frowned. Come to the study. Father never trusted anyone. Whenever matters of great importance arose, no one was allowed near the study. Not even his most trusted steward. The Song family was a royal merchant clan, holding the imperial salt seal. But salt taxes were unbearably high. For years, father had wanted to smuggle salt, but hadn't found a secure route. He locked the study door and asked urgently, Tingyuan, don't tell me, you found a salt route. I calmly bolted the door and turned to face him. Gone was the obedient daughter from before. My gaze was ice cold. With a faint, sharp smile, I asked, Father, have you already promised me and Tingyi to the Fei and Zhang families? His face changed instantly. He understood right away, the salt was bait. In a rage, he grabbed the teacup by his side and hurled it at me. It shattered at my feet, soaking the hem of my skirt. I stood there unmoved. I didn't flinch, not even a blink. Father slapped his sleeve and growled. Marriage is a matter for parents to decide, for matchmakers to arrange. Do you think a daughter like you has a say in it? If you have no salt route, then return to your room. Fix your hair and makeup. Stop wasting time. I didn't move. I only lifted my head and looked him in the eye. Father, Fei Haoluan is cruel by nature. Before marriage, he already keeps a barbarian concubine. No one in Guangzhou wants to marry their daughter to him. He only came to the capital because he covets the Song dowry. As for Jiang Wentuan, outwardly gentle, inwardly malicious. He's failed the imperial exams repeatedly and vents his frustration by tormenting others. Only after seeing the futility of his future did he come to seek marriage. As I spoke, Father's brows furrowed deeper. But I knew it wasn't because of their character. It was because I dared speak out of turn. When I finished, he stood up abruptly, finger pointed at me. Even a drop of kindness must be repaid like a spring. Ungrateful child. Even if what you say is true, we owe them this debt. That's your debt, not mine. Not Tinggi's. His eyes widened. In his world, the father owes, the children repay. That's unquestionable. We, as daughters, should repay his debt with joy and gratitude. Unfilial daughter. At last, his fury erupted. He reached for the rattan cane hanging on the wall. But before he could strike me, a shadow dropped from the ceiling. With a heavy thud, Father was pinned to the ground. Who are you? Song Tingyuan. You dare bring outsiders into my study. Tell him to let go. His face was pressed hard into the floor by Zhang Hao, twisted and furious. Tie him up. The weakness, submission, and blind obedience of my past life had once pushed me into the abyss. At this very moment, all of it vanished like smoke. For the first time, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Tingyuan, what are you doing? If you have something to say, can't we talk it over? If you don't want to marry, then let your sister do it. Just tell him to let me go. MMPH. I waved my hand. Zhang Hao gagged him again and stayed to watch him as I left the study. Steward Li was already waiting outside. When he saw me exit the room alone, a flicker of unease crossed his face. The master suddenly felt unwell, I said coldly. He asked me to receive the guests in his stead. Steward Li glanced at me, then tried to peer into the study behind me. His expression tightened. Eldest miss, perhaps we should inform third young master. If not, I can go fetch him. That third son of the Song family, my half-brother from a concubine. And yet somehow, even a child born of a concubine held more weight than me, the legitimate eldest daughter. Without hesitation, I raised my hand and slapped him. Slap. Steward Li, did you not understand what I just said? The old man stood frozen for a moment, stunned. Then, realizing his mistake, he dropped to his knees. I dare not. I misspoke. Please forgive me, eldest miss. I gave him a cool glance and walked straight to the main hall. Fei Haoluan and Jiang Wentuan had already arrived. As I entered, the two men were deep in lively conversation until they saw me. Then silence fell instantly. My father is unwell, I said. He asked me to receive you on his behalf. I trust neither of you minds. Both quickly shook their heads. Jiang Wentuan rose first, offering a graceful salute, voice smooth. I've long heard of the famed beauty of the Song family's eldest daughter. Seeing you today, I see your reputation is well earned. Fei Haoluan wasn't as eloquent, but I could sense his growing impatience. His hand curled into a tight fist. Still, he stood and said in a hoarse voice, Jiang is right. I smiled faintly in response. I heard the two of you traveled light, bringing few funds with you. Our Song family happens to have a spare villa on the outskirts of the capital. Perhaps you could borrow it for a short stay. Their expressions shifted. Ordinarily, with the Song family and Apos' wealth, offering 10 villas would not be out of the question. Yet I merely said they could borrow one. Fei Haoluan couldn't hold back. His tone turned cold. Miss Song, our Fei family is your father's benefactor. At that, I gently lifted a silk handkerchief to my face, feigning shyness. Fei Gongzi, how can you say such a thing? The kindness of the Fei and Jiang families. Of course my father remembers it well. But he is currently unwell. When he recovers, he will surely repay that kindness. There is no need for you both to be in such a rush. The two men exchanged glances, sensing something was off, but ultimately nodded in agreement. I instructed the servants to escort them to a deserted villa on the far outskirts of the city, along with attendants and guards. Naturally, every one of them was handpicked by me, to monitor their every move. In my past life, each of those who hurt me, I will not let them die too easily this time. Night fell. Mother and Tingy were likely already at the mountain shrine and would not return tonight. Half the manor now lay quiet and empty. I stood on, briefly lost in thought. My grandfather once taught me to be kind and filial. But he also taught me, once the bow is drawn, it cannot be undone. When full night arrived, I ordered stewardly to summon Song Guangyao, my half-brother. Father's study was now pitch black. I took a fire striker and lit a candle. The man inside, once accustomed to a life of comfort, was now pale as a ghost after just one afternoon of being tied up. His hair was disheveled. His appearance, utterly miserable. Zhang Hao pulled the gag from his mouth. I sat down and looked at him. This man, who once stormed through my life like a hurricane and dragged me and my sister into hell. Now, he was nothing more than a dying breeze. Tingyuan, he croaked. Why are you doing this? I'm your father. There was no more anger in him, only weakness. A whisper of a man. In my past life, there were so many things I wanted to ask him. Why didn't you save us? Was your so-called honor and gratitude truly worth more than your daughter's lives? But now, I didn't want to ask anymore. What was I hoping to hear? That he had his own suffering. That he meant well. Would that have changed anything? Would I have believed him? Would I have forgiven? I had already died once. So had Tingy. His cruelty. It wasn't for our sake. It was because deep down, he was always this cruel. I looked at the withered face before me and said softly, I'm sorry, Father. I want to live, so you must die. The blade rose, and in one clean stroke, severed his throat. Hot blood sprayed across my face. The terror in his eyes, that final moment of dread, would forever be etched in his expression. Zhang Hao wiped the blood off his blade and handed me a handkerchief. Miss, you and Appos, restained. Please clean it. Suddenly, the door to the study burst open. Father, you called for me. Song Guangyao had just stepped in when he saw my blood-covered face. He frowned, pointed at me, and said coldly, Song Tingyuan, what did you do? Where's father? This half-brother of mine had never shown me an ounce of respect. Raised under our father and Appos' teachings, he viewed daughters as nothing more than tools for the family and Appos' use. I shifted slightly, revealing the pool of blood behind me. His eyes widened. Shock froze his features. You. He didn't even finish his sentence before collapsing onto the floor. Youth does have its merits. He passed out immediately. I stepped over his body without pause. In the Song family, no one is innocent. Zhang Hao and I exited my father's private courtyard. Behind us, flames began to rise. Steward Li saw us approaching, and his eyes bulged with shock. Terror and panic flickered in his gaze. I looked at him coolly and asked, Steward Li, from this day forth, are you willing to serve me loyally? With a loud thump, he dropped to his knees, trembling all over. This old servant is willing to follow the mistress through fire and water, without hesitation. That fire devoured over half of the Song estate. Had it not been for the valiant efforts of the eldest daughter, who braved the flames to save the manor, the whole estate might have turned to ash. It was unfortunate, they said, that the patriarch of the Song family and his third son were both burned alive in the study. When Mother and Tingy returned, they arrived just in time to see me nearly fainting from grief before the coffin. Mother never imagined that a single day away would lead to such earth-shattering tragedy. Husband, how could you leave like this? We still don't have a son to carry on the family name. She wailed in anguish, nearly throwing herself into the grave. Even now, the one thing she mourned most was not having birthed a son. Tingy, worried, gently tried to comfort her. Mother, you still have us. But she shoved Tingy aside with a flick of her sleeve. What good are you? You're all just useless daughters. It was I who failed. I couldn't give him a son. Tingy stared at her, eyes filled with a mixture of shock and bitter disappointment. I turned away and let tears fall again. Yes, we were merely useless daughters. Which was why no one would suspect me. Though father had many concubines, he had few children. Other than me and Tingy, there remained only a single 6-year-old son, born of a low-ranking concubine. A 6-year-old child, without maternal family backing, was the perfect scapegoat. Many came to offer condolences. Fei Haoluan and Zhang Wentuan also rushed over after receiving the news. Both were stunned when they arrived, still hoping to talk about debts and gratitude, yet my father was already dead. But their panic didn't last long, because the moment Mother saw them, her face lit up with joy as if they were her own sons. In front of the entire gathering, she made a solemn vow. Though my husband is gone, the Song family will never forget the kindness of the Fei and Jiang families. Had father's charred corpse not still been resting in the mourning hall, she likely would have forced Tingyi and me to marry them right then and there. The two men clung to her words like lifelines, sobbing loudly before the altar, full of performative grief. I turned to look at Tingyi, kneeling quietly beside me. Her gaze was locked onto Jiang Wentuan. Her hands trembled from how tightly they were clenched. Hatred blazed in her eyes. I gently took her hand, smoothing the wrinkles from her palm. Father's funeral was grand and ostentatious. With the guests all gathered, I ordered Steward Li to invite the merchants who had long-standing ties to the Song family to a separate hall. To them, the moment my father died, the Song estate became a feast of profit. If I didn't act now, it would soon be picked clean to the bone. At the Song family and Appo's private tavern, I sat at the head of the table. Below me sat over 10 merchants, each wearing a different expression. One of them finally spoke up. "Miss Song, may I ask why you've gathered us here today?" It was Manager Wang, seated to my left. Seeing that all were present, I dabbed my eyes with a handkerchief, putting on a frail, sorrowful expression. "Uncles, my father passed so suddenly. With no male heir to host guests, I had no choice but to take his place today. I hope you'll forgive me." Manager Wang waved dismissively. Given the situation, who cares whether it's a man or woman doing the receiving? What we care about is whether we can get a piece of meat off the Song family before it collapses. I pulled out a bundle of debt papers I had carefully gathered over the past few days and motioned for Steward Li to distribute them. These are the debts my father signed during his lifetime. Now that he's gone, I, on behalf of the Song family, will annul them all. The room erupted. "Is that true, Miss Song?" I smiled gently. Though I am a woman, my word is my bond. The commotion only grew louder. Some looked genuinely moved, but more of them had greed in their eyes. My gesture of goodwill, in their eyes, was nothing more than the weakness of an easy target. Just as their whispers reached their peak, I let go of the teacup in my hand. Clang! The sharp crack of shattering porcelain silenced the entire hall. All eyes turned to me. I curled my lips faintly. "Apologies," my hand slipped. Manager Wang snorted and slammed the debt paper onto the table. "Miss Song, the Wang family doesn't need your scraps. The Song family may be leaderless now, but the Wang clan will not bully widows and orphans. I'll have the servants deliver the silver ode." It was clear he refused to accept this debt forgiveness. The others glanced at each other, uncertain. Wang's family had a favored consort in the palace. His stance carried weight. I slowly rose to my feet. If I had handed out honey, now it was time to offer the whip. My father shared ties with you all for over a decade. Though I'm young, I know many things he knew. I lifted my hand. Steward Li stepped forward and handed each merchant a sealed envelope. Each letter contained damning evidence of their past crimes. "Uncles, I will not reveal these. But if anyone tries to drive the Song family into ruin, well, then I can't say what might happen." Everyone in that room understood how the world worked. They had assumed the fire that claimed my father also destroyed these documents. What they didn't know was that I had removed them from the study before the flames consumed it. Manager Wang slammed the table, furious. "You think your Song family is so clean?" I was unbothered. I clasped my hands and replied calmly. "Yesterday, I entered the palace and personally reported all of my father's dealings to His Majesty. The Emperor, in his mercy, has decided not to pursue them further. The Song family and Appo's position as royal merchants wasn't earned through wealth alone. It was because my maternal uncle once saved the Emperor's life. I offered up most of our family's gold and jewels as tribute. By invoking my uncle's old merit, I was able to secure a path of survival for the Song family." Manager Wang said no more. He simply tucked the letter and debt note into his robe, silently acknowledging the new order. In business, friend or foe was often a matter of convenience. Once he yielded, the rest followed, quietly stowing their documents away. Flattering voices quickly followed. "Miss Song truly is a heroine among women. If Song Laoi could see this from the afterlife, he would surely smile in peace." Smile in peace. I tilted my head slightly. If he could see this, I doubt he'd smile at all. After settling the merchants, I barely had time to catch my breath when a panicked maid rushed in. "Eldest miss, Madam says she wants to follow Master in death." I didn't panic. Calmly, I followed her back to the Song estate. Father had already been buried. If Mother truly intended to die for him, she would have done it sooner. White mourning cloth still draped every corner of the manor. Even before I reached the garden, I heard her wailing. In the courtyard, beneath the old pagoda tree, a crowd had gathered. A white silk sash hung from a branch. Mother stood atop a stool, gripping the fabric, sobbing and howling. Tingy stood nearby, calm-faced, but a red mark glowed faintly on her cheek. Aside from the household staff, Fei Halloween and Jiang Wentuan were also present. As I approached, the old nursemaid beside Mother hurried over. "Eldest miss, please persuade the madam." Before I could say a word, Mother screamed. "No one can stop me. I've lost everything. My brothers, my parents, and now even my husband is gone. At first I endured, thinking I had to arrange my daughter's marriages. But now, you two are unfilial, stubborn. Husband, I'm coming to join you." As she cried, Mother began to tighten the white silk around her neck. Tingy simply closed her eyes, expression indifferent. She had no intention of stopping her. On the contrary, Fei Halloween and Jiang Wentuan rushed forward in panic. "Auntie, please don't do anything rash." I didn't need to guess the reason behind this performance. Mother was playing this out for them. Realizing neither Tingy nor I had any intention of pleading or stopping her, not even uttering a word of concern, her face twisted with embarrassment and growing anger. Eventually, under the two men's coaxing, she slowly stepped down. Stewardess' son quickly dropped to her knees before me, choking back sobs. "Eldest miss, please don't blame this old servant. Since master passed, Madam cries herself to sleep every day. If not for the two of you, she would have followed him long ago. It breaks my heart to watch." I didn't respond. I didn't even spare her a glance. I simply walked past her toward Mother. Beneath the pagoda tree, Mother was still awkwardly perched on the stool, the silk draped down her neck, but not yet tightened. I glanced over her with a calm gaze, then asked softly, "Mother, did you strike Tingy just now?" She hadn't expected me to say that. Her expression froze. Then, in a blink, her face turned red, and tears streamed down. "Tingyuan, even you say this to me." "Oh, husband, I truly have no will to live." I looked at her, my voice cold and measured. "If you want to die, then go ahead." For a brief moment, silence gripped the entire courtyard. Mother blinked repeatedly, unable to believe her ears. What did you say?" I didn't answer. Instead, I turned to the two uninvited guests and issued a direct order. "It's late. Gentlemen, please take your leave." Jiang Wentuan stepped forward and raised his voice in protest. "Miss Song, no matter what, you can't speak to your aunt this way. She's grieving. You should comfort her, not." Before he could finish, Tingy snapped. "Who do you think you are? How dare you stand in our home and lecture my sister?" Tingy moved in front of me, furious, like a small lion cub guarding its den. How dare you speak this way? Such disrespect. You've failed your exams for years and haven't even passed the provincial level. What right do you have to preach about propriety?" Her words struck directly at his deepest wound. Jiang Wentuan's face twisted with rage. He stepped forward, ready to argue. But before he could get close, Zhang Hao, who had been silently guarding behind me, delivered a powerful punch. The frail scholar crumpled to the ground instantly. I gave Zhang Hao a slight nod. This man disrespected second miss. "Find him. Send him to the yamen." Zhang Hao motioned, and a few burly guards stepped out from the shadows, swiftly tying up the unconscious man. Everything happened so quickly that by the time my mother realized what was happening, Jiang Wentuan was already being dragged away. Panicked, she threw down the silk sash, leapt off the stool, and ran forward, abandoning all decorum. "What are you doing? He's your father's benefactor." I gestured for the maidservants to hold her back and smiled slowly. "Mother, father is already dead. If you really want to repay his debts, you can go down and repay them with him." Mother's and Fei Halloween's faces turned deathly pale. Tears spilled from her eyes as she shouted at me. "Song Tingyuan, your father taught you loyalty and filial piety. Have you forgotten it all?" "Loyalty. Filial piety. That depends. Loyalty to whom? Filial to whom? I had a father who cared only for power and pride. A mother who worshipped sons and saw daughters as burdens. They don't deserve it." I waved my hand. Zhang Hao and the guards ignored my mother's cries and dragged Jiang Wentuan away. The others turned to Fei Halloween, silently asking whether he would leave on his own or be escorted. Fei Haoluan clenched his fists, trembling. But in the end, he turned and stormed off. Even then, Mother still called after him. "Dear Haoluan, don't worry. Auntie will surely repay your family's kindness." I was quite curious to see how she planned to repay them. With father dead, crushing those two men would be no harder than crushing ants. But there was no rush. I had already sent a letter to Jiang Wentuan's beloved cousin in the countryside. In the last life, he constantly claimed she was his true love. Well then, let her come. As for Fei Haoluan, his mother and his barbarian concubine were en route to the capital. If their schedule held, they'd arrive tomorrow. None of them would escape. After that day, Mother fell seriously ill. Every day, she sent servants to call for me 3 times. But I never once went. Tingyi, soft-hearted as ever, visited her out of pity. She was good at everything, except being too kind. Still, even with all her gentleness, Mother managed to infuriate her. "Sister, do you know what she asked of me? She wanted me to go to the Yamen and plead injustice for Jiang Wentuan, to take the punishment in his place. Not only that, she said before Father and Appo's mourning period ended, we must marry into the Fei and Jiang families immediately, bear children, and repay the favor. If not, she'll die of heartbreak." Hearing her vent in outrage, I finally looked up from the account ledgers. "She wants to die? Has she taken her medicine yet?" The physician, already waiting nearby, quickly stepped forward. "Madam has been taking her medicine on time every day. It's merely emotional distress, nothing serious. She should recover in a few days." I nodded, flipping to the next page of the ledger. "Then don't visit her anymore. If she truly wants to die, let her." Tingyi bit her lip in silence, clearly feeling wronged. "Sister, is she really our mother?" My hand, still holding the ledger, froze mid-page. Looking at Tingyi's aggrieved face, I waved the servants out of the room. Tingyi had always been different from me. When our mother carried her, she believed the child would be a son. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. When she learned the child was a daughter, and that she could no longer conceive again, her attitude toward Tingyi turned increasingly cold. She often sighed in front of her, saying, "If only you had been a boy." Though Tingyi appeared lively and cheerful on the outside, inside she was painfully sensitive. Whenever she was wronged, her first thought wasn't to blame others, but to question if she had done something wrong herself. Otherwise, in our past life, she wouldn't have allowed Jiang Wentuan to torment her until she died. Many things she pretended not to care about, but she never forgot them. I held her hand firmly and looked her in the eyes. "Tingyi, do you know how Father died? The study, the fire." I shook my head. "I killed him." Her pupils shrank. I sighed softly. From beginning to end, she had never asked me what I had done while she and Mother were away at the temple. She wasn't stupid. She simply chose to lie to herself, refusing to believe I had killed our father. "Tingyi, who killed us in our past life?" She trembled, voice soft. "Jiang Wentuan. Fei Haoluan. Tu Qingqing." I tightened my grip on her hand, voice like ice. "It was Father and Mother. They stood by, watched us suffer, and did nothing. Do you know why?" She nodded, then shook her head. I said gently, "Because they were selfish. Because they never loved us. Because from the beginning, they were never good people. It wasn't because you were born a girl. Being a girl was never the problem." Hot tears fell onto my hand. I gently patted her back, whispering, "Tingyi, promise me this. If anyone dares make you unhappy, you'll make sure they live the rest of their life in misery." Not long after, Jiang Wentuan was released. Thanks to my arrangements at the Yamen, his days there were far from pleasant. In just a few days, he was gaunt, bedridden, and frail. His cousin, Tu Qingqing, came hoping to rely on him, only to find him begging her to bring silver to support him. In the past life, they had been a poetic pair, composing verses and sipping wine together. But all that refinement had been built on the dowry of my sister. In this life, forget elegance, not even scraps of affection remained. In mere days, the two of them were hurling insults at each other. I had never reclaimed the villa I gave them. Now, 2 large families were crammed into one small compound. The household servants reported frequent brawls between Fei Haoluan's barbarian mistress and Tu Qingqing, all over rooms. Seeing her so-called benefactors in misery, Mother grew frantic with worry. But I now controlled every matter of the household. Even her monthly allowance wasn't enough to sustain herself, let alone help others. So she turned her attention to Tingy. But this time, Tingy didn't give her face. After our last talk, she finally let go, no longer shackled by mother's thinking. Recently, she'd taken great interest in business. Just as I acquired a small cosmetics shop, she eagerly asked to manage it. The store wasn't large, but Tingy handled everything herself. So busy her feet barely touched the ground. When mother's cries echoed through the manor, Tingy simply yawned and went back to sleep. With no other options, mother secretly pawned her jewelry. But all the pawn shops in the capital knew the Song family well. No one dared accept anything without checking with me first. One shopboy came, placing a pouch of gems in front of me. "Manager Song, these belong to your mother. Should we accept them?" I glanced at them, all her personal belongings, nothing important. I waved him off. Once he left, I turned to Zhang Hao. "Send someone to watch mother. As soon as she steps out of the pawn shop, rob her of everything. If she loved charity so much, then as her daughter, I should respect her generosity." The first time she was robbed, mother swallowed her anger in silence. The second time, she brought guards. But even with protection, her silver vanished again. She dared not report it, afraid I would find out. In the end, all she could do was endure. But this time, the frustration was real. She grew so furious that her blood pressure spiked, and she fell ill. In our past life, no matter how much humiliation Tingy and I endured, she was never this heartbroken. Yet even now, in her sickbed, she couldn't and oppose, bear to see her benefactors suffer. She secretly conspired with Fei Haoluan and Jiang Wentuan, planning to drug Tingy and me at an upcoming Song family banquet, so we'd be forced to marry them. When I heard this, I laughed out loud. What kind of mother would poison her own daughters in the name of repaying kindness? Just then, a message arrived from Jiangnan. They'd located the whereabouts of Zhang Hao's sister. So I arranged for Tingy and Zhang Hao to leave on the day of the banquet. She didn't need to witness the filth I was about to uncover. The banquet was intended for guests. But more importantly, it was a public declaration. From this day on, the Song family would be led by me, Song Tingyuan. Halfway through the feast, a maid accidentally spilled tea on me. She fell to her knees, sobbing. "This lowly maid deserves death. Please forgive me, eldest miss. Let me escort you to change." I smiled calmly, excused myself from the table, and followed her toward the rear courtyard. Once we reached a secluded path, I suddenly stopped. The maid turned, looking nervous. "Eldest miss, please, we must hurry." I looked at her face, a face I could never forget, not even in dreams. In my past life, it was she who had skinned my loyal dog with her own hands. She even held up the bloodied pelt and laughed. "Sister, look how beautiful this fur is. Perfect for making a hat for Yuan." Seeing me stare silently, Xing Yuani took a step forward, reaching for my hand. I raised mine and slapped her hard across the face. Slap. "Filth. What are you trying to do?" She froze, stunned, hand rising to touch her cheek, where blood had already begun to pool. "Ow!" A shrill scream tore from her throat, but it was quickly muffled as someone stepped forward and knocked her unconscious. I pulled a small knife from my sleeve. What she did to me in my last life, not even 100 cuts could make up for it. She wanted to drug me, to have me raped. I only meant to return her generosity, just with a small change in lead roles. A stick of incense later, mother arrived at the rear courtyard, leading a group of people. Just as she raised her hand to push open the door, she saw me walking out from the side. Her hand froze in midair, her expression stunned. Her face, pale from illness, flushed red from shock and adrenaline. "You, what are you doing here?" I tilted my head and asked calmly. "Mother, why did you bring so many people? What were you planning to do?" She flinched, quickly pulling her hand back. But before she could say more, muffled moans rose from the room behind me, unmistakably intimate. The guests exchanged glances. They knew exactly what was going on. Mother panicked and waved her hands. "Nothing. Nothing. Please, everyone, go back to the banquet." But no one was leaving. They smelled scandal. The wife of manager's son grabbed mother's sleeve, smiling. "Madam Song, didn't you say there was something exciting for us to see? We're already here, why turn back now?" Madam Zhao added with a chuckle. "Exactly. We came all this way. Surely you won't send us away empty-handed." As the women jostled the door, it suddenly swung open. "Ah!" A collective scream rang out. Inside, 3 figures lay bare upon the bed, 2 men and 1 woman. The woman's body was covered in scratches, but the men seemed completely oblivious, tangled up with her like animals. Mother trembled violently, turning to me, finger pointing, voice cracking. You. I arched a brow and smiled faintly. These three dared defile my home with such filth. Guards, send them to the yamen. No. Mother shrieked, but before she could catch her breath, she fainted on the spot. I gestured to the servants. Carry her to her room. Apologies, everyone. Since my father passed, my mother has been confused. Please excuse the disturbance. The crowd erupted into murmurs and whispers, but I pretended not to hear, calmly resuming my role as hostess, as though nothing had happened. Only after the banquet ended did I visit her quarters. The air was thick with the smell of medicine. Her health had been deteriorating for some time, worsened by self-inflicted stress. And now, by sheer fury, her condition had worsened. Seeing me, she signaled stewardess Sun to help her sit up. Even before she could speak, tears streamed down her face. Ting Yuan, I was wrong. I shouldn't have schemed against you. It's all my fault. Her sobs turned into gasps. I said nothing. My face remained impassive. Inside, I felt absolutely nothing. Seeing me unmoved, panic flickered in her eyes. Ting Yuan, please forgive me. I won't meddle again. Just release Fei Haoluan and Jiang Wentuan. They are your father's benefactors. Even now, she still thought of them. I sneered. Mother, if I told you those two were the ones who murdered me and Tingy in our past life, would you still call them benefactors? She froze. But moments later, she began sobbing again. Don't speak nonsense. They would never. I laughed quietly. What a fool I had been to even ask her. She'd already answered me once, in my previous life. I gave her one last glance, then turned and left. If she still wished to be merciful, then let her go to the countryside temple and chant sutras beside an oil lamp for the rest of her days. Fei Haoluan, Jiang Wentuan, and Xing Yuani were all convicted of adultery and thrown into prison. Jiang Wentuan's body was already frail, but I ensured he wouldn't die easily. I assigned a physician to keep him alive. The jailers had 100 ways to torment prisoners. With just one jar of liquor, they could invent 10 new forms of cruelty. I would let them live, but in suffering far worse than death. Tu Qingqing made no effort to save Jiang Wentuan. She had grown used to luxury in the capital. Now that her cousin had become a burden, she dreamed of marrying into wealth as a concubine. But before she could act, I had her disfigured. Become a concubine. Sell yourself to a brothel. Dream on. Weren't you so refined? So proud of your virtue. Then I would make your remaining days a spectacle, a living joke. As for Fei Haoluan's mother, an old woman, too weak to endure hardship, I figured she must miss her son terribly. So I had her sent to the prison too, so she could see him tortured every single day. There's no agony deeper than watching your own child suffer and being unable to stop it. In the second year after I took over the Song family, Mother passed away. The countryside was harsh, the food plain. She only lasted a year. When I received the news, I was in a meeting with Manager Wang. In just 1 year, I had grown the Song family's fortune beyond what it ever was. I waved for the servant to leave, then returned to the discussion. Manager Wang paused for a moment and asked, what news was so urgent it had to interrupt our meeting? I shook my head lightly, smiling. Nothing serious. My mother died. He fell silent. After a year of business with me, he understood the kind of person I truly was. Behind my calm voice and gentle smile lurked something far more ruthless. They even gave me a name behind my back. Yasha, the she-devil. I curled my lips, amused. Yasha, I said softly. I like that name. The end.